Hey everybody! I have been asked, and sometimes challenged, about the fact that in all of my demonstration videos, I set my units to their average stats. I do that because simple averages are the best representation of each unit's capabilities. To show why that's true, and to explore how reliable growths actually are, I want to present this example. Star of this show is a perfectly average Odin at level 14 with an assortment of stat boosts. He got HP, magic, and defense tonics, a meal that grants him 2 defense and 1 magic, and the Spirit Dust from Chapter 11. On top of those, Wyvern Release gives him 2 extra magic, 1 luck, and 3 defense. Those are the essentials. Because he'll fight an awful lot of enemies who have lances, I've given him skill and luck tonics as well. Odin does have B rank and tomes, which might seem a little unusual, but in fact it's typical because of the way he works. As a Nosferatu tank, he's able to handle a lot of enemies at once, and he fights each one twice. For the same reason, level 14 is probably selling him a little short. At equal levels, he gets 40 XP per kill instead of 30 because he 2-rounds everything. Notably, I haven't boosted Odin's speed. As a result, both Reyna and Takumi double him. Fortunately, none of the generics do. Odin's base speed of 7 is enough to stop that. The reason why Takumi isn't immediately trying for a kill is that Odin already weakened him. The AI sees that Odin will kill on his counterattack, so it doesn't count Takumi's follow-up when looking for possible kills. Odin levels up with his victory over Takumi.
Too much power!
In the meantime, the rest of my team has set up to handle other threats. Silas and Kaze are working together against the knights in the northeast corner. Felicia and Corrin are tackling the diviners in the other corner, while also drawing Orochi up across the bridge. Corrin has enough strength to kill the 2 diviners who can reach him, thanks to the combined +5 he's getting from Felicia and Camilla.
Yes!
Here I am.
Now that Orochi is close, I'll pick her squad apart.
Let's go.
I'm here for you. What should we do?
I can put Baruka in front to fend off the Cavaliers.
Please, accept my help.
Since Kaze promoted early, I'll concentrate the experience points here into Silas.
Trust me.
Everything will be fine. Leave it to me.
Finally, we go back to Odin, and thus back to the main topic of this video. I'm about to have him attack and kill Reyna. That choice is very dependent on his particular stats. If Odin were even 1 point short on magic, that attack would be suicidal. So if you're looking at this, you might assume that Odin absolutely needs to hit his magic growth at least 5 times. By level 14, his chance to do that is exactly 50%. That's not how this works, though. If Odin couldn't kill Reyna, he could simply attack the adjacent knight on player phase, or he could even back up into the woods and kill the diviner. Reyna would immediately attack him, but her second hit would get blocked by Elise's dual guard, and therefore she would never get a free attack that Odin couldn't heal back. But never mind that. Let's say you're dead set on doing these exact moves, and you want to know how likely it is that Odin will have the stats he needs to succeed. Let's also assume, just for the sake of argument, that the average stats I started with are the bare minimum. The key stats are HP, magic, and defense, and also technically resistance because of the diviner, but I'll ignore that to simplify things. To calculate the overall chances, you would compute how often he'd get at least 5 points of HP, which is 62% of the time, 5 points of magic, 50%, and 4 points of defense, 64%. Then you'd multiply all those together and discover that Odin hits the thresholds a little less than 20% of the time. That seems pretty lame. Why would I ever rely on average stats if I'm hitting them on less than 1 in 5 runs? The answer is that this whole analysis is wrong. Stat thresholds are not independent from each other because stats are fungible. For example, extra HP can make up for a lack of defense and resistance. Extra bulk can let you safely 2-round enemies, which may reduce the need for offensive stats. With high enough speed to double, you don't need as much offensive power, and in guard stance that helps you on defense too. In this scenario, that last one doesn't apply, but the Nosferatu tome makes the concept a lot more literal, because it translates magic directly into HP. Because of this, treating the different stats as independent variables gives you the wrong answer. If you want to know the actual odds of hitting the stat thresholds, you need to do something more sophisticated. I'm me, so that's exactly what I did. I built a model to test this. There are 10,000 combinations of HP, magic, speed, and defense that Odin may have by level 14. Some combinations are more common than others, so I had to account for that. I gave each possible Odin the same stat boost he got here, plus a speed tonic. With a few simplifying assumptions, such as ignoring variations in enemy move order, I had the model check what happens when you make these moves with each of those 10,000 Odins. The result is that Odin at level 14 has the necessary stats 42.4% of the time. And to be clear, that's from following my moves exactly, even if that means attacking Reyna when you're too weak to kill and slow enough to get doubled. That 42% figure also ignores any stats Odin may have gained in the process. You might recall that Odin leveled up on turn 1. If he manages to hit his magic, speed, or defense growths, they very well might save him. And the good news is that Odin is strong enough to survive turn 1 87.5% of the time. In the vast majority of cases, he gets at least one chance to help himself with his growths. My conclusion is that, contrary to what the naive calculation said, Odin can actually do this most of the time. And if he reaches turn 3, he's essentially home free. If he was strong enough to get through turn 2, he's almost certain to be fine now.
My aching blood!
New Fire Emblem players often overvalue growths. Several people in the community have worked hard to rectify this problem and educate people about the value of good base stats. But now, I would say that many advanced players have absorbed that lesson a little too well, and they're far too conservative about growth units. If you are doing an LTC and you're already applying every possible resource toward the goal of minimizing your turn count, and you absolutely need a particular stat threshold for a solo boss kill or something, then I understand that attitude. But in all other situations, the difference between keeping up with your average growths and falling behind is not a matter of total success versus total failure. You have to remember one very important thing. This is a strategy game. And if your stats aren't good enough, you're allowed to change your strategy. So let's run that back. This is the exact same scenario, except that I've decreased all of Odin's stats by 2 and reduced his tome rank. As it happens, these are his 10th percentile stats. He has at least this much HP more than 90% of the time, and the same is true for his magic, speed, and defense. But don't let that mislead you. The chance for him to be this badly screwed in all 4 stats at once is less than 0.1%. For Odin, fighting Reyna is now out of the question. But in order to compensate for that, all I have to do is modify my approach a little. At base, Camilla survives a single attack from Reyna with an HP tonic and the defense tonic. So I can use Camilla to lure Reyna toward my archer, Effie, and then have Effie shoot her down. When Odin had his average stats, I wasn't worrying about speed at all, but in this scenario, Odin can't weaken Takumi on player phase. The only space where he could do that is covered by Reyna. Now getting doubled by him is a real problem. In order to help on that front, I've given Odin a speed tonic, and I've also cooked a different meal that provides 2 speed and 1 defense. With 13 total speed, Odin avoids getting doubled. When I play through the campaign, I'm not merely trying to win each battle. I'm also constantly working toward a long-term strategy that involves training certain units and building particular support chains. For example, it's important to keep Kaze and Silas together because I want Silas to acquire the ninja class as soon as possible. Likewise, I want Odin to pair with Elise so that they can get married and produce Ophelia. Because of those strategic considerations, I've built this backup plan so that I'm still doing largely the same things with the same units, and the only real difference in preparations was the change in meal, which did cost me a few tonics. Odin doesn't want to stay on a tiny choke point where he can only face one enemy at melee range, so Silas takes the Takumi kill, and Kaze makes room for Odin to advance.
I am at your service.
Such are the whims of fate!
Quickly now.
You are not alone! Too much power!
This Reyna kill is Iron Man safe. Your superiority doesn't matter when you lunge her into an archer's range.
Gotta eliminate it.
Well, it would be Iron Man safe with skill and luck tonics.
Here we go.
With Effie getting refreshed, we're heading back into familiar territory. The difference for the Western team is that Baruka is now busy elsewhere, so we have to be a little more fancy.
You'll be all right.
Not to worry.
Felicia can hold this bridge against the Diviners and prevent any of the Cavaliers from reaching her. The trick is that she forces the nearest Diviner to body block. Remember, it's extremely unlikely for Odin to be this bad, yet he's still managing to do almost everything he did before. And I haven't made any strategic sacrifices to keep him performing at this level. In a truly absurd stat screwage scenario, those are available, some small and some large. One possibility is to change my deployment. I could have dropped Elise and given her job to Wyvern Rider Corrin, who would give Odin 2 more defense and 1 more speed at sea support, not to mention 10 extra hit. In a lot of cases, that would be enough for Odin to pull off my original strategy. Or, because Odin didn't have to fly across the river in this setup, he could have used Dark Knight Nyx. She would give him more magic and, depending on their support rank, possibly more speed. At the larger end of the sacrifice spectrum, I could replace Silas or Kaze with Haitaka and his rally defense. And there's also the nuclear option of promoting Odin. I don't want to do that because it's easier for him to grab Vantage and pass it to Ophelia if he hasn't promoted yet, but that is 1 HP, 3 magic, 3 speed, and 2 defense that he can get if he really needs them.
I'll be your shield!
So when I make these guides using average stats, I know by default that the strategies I'm presenting are doable in almost any real run. Most of the time, if your units are the same level as mine, they'll be capable of the same things with only minor adjustments. And even if the RNG has been extremely unkind to your stats, you can still probably achieve the same goals, as long as you understand the problems that will come from your stat deficit, and you take steps to rectify them.
Oh. Must I restrain myself?
I'd like to point out that despite the changes I've been forced to make, I'm still able to move Benny and Charlotte to the front lines on the turn they
Be
join.
fine.
We've got this.
We have no choice.
In order to hide from the wyverns, Kaze pairs up with Silas. Meanwhile, Odin continues his Odining. Between tonics, meals, skills, rallies, forging, and the stance system, Fire Emblem Fates has the most dynamic stats in the whole series. Those mechanics smooth out the stat variance so much that missing your averages is almost never a real problem. And don't forget that you're just as likely to get ahead of your averages as you are to fall behind, so your units might be capable of deeds much more impressive than anything I ever do. My guides and demonstrations aim to present every unit in a way that is both fair and realistic. With this dynamism in mind, the best way to do that is to use simple averages, and not anything more conservative than that.